What if your 10-year-old stood up in a crowded room and said something so unexpected, so emotionally charged, that it left Elon Musk speechless? What would it take for a child to capture the attention of one of the busiest, most brilliant minds on Earth? The moment unfolded on a warm spring afternoon in Austin, Texas, in front of hundreds of tech insiders, press, and precocious young students at the Future Innovators Summit hosted by SpaceX. The air buzzed with excitement. Children in tailored suits and STEM t-shirts fidgeted in their seats, clutching notepads filled with questions for the billionaire entrepreneur. The panel had just begun, and Elon Musk sat in his familiar relaxed posture, slightly hunched forward, hands clasped, eyes twinkling with anticipation or perhaps mild boredom. Question after question poured in. Some asked about colonizing Mars, others about AI, electric cars, or robots. Then a hand went up in the middle row. It was a small hand, slightly trembling. Elon pointed to her, motioning the mic attendant. "You, right there, in the blue hoodie. What's your question?" The girl stood slowly. She looked like she didn't belong, no flash, no brand names, hair slightly unkempt, cheeks flushed. She cleared her throat. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. "Mr. Musk," she said, "if you're trying to save humanity, how come no one's saving kids like me?" A silence followed. The kind that doesn't feel like dead air, but more like the air itself has paused, listening. Elon blinked. The moderators froze. The camera guy even took a step forward. There it was, a simple sentence, yet it echoed louder than a rocket launch. In the front row, journalists stopped typing. In the back, a boy muttered, "Whoa." Elon's lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. He leaned in. "Can you say that again?" he asked, softer. She nodded. "I said, how come no one's saving kids like me?" There was no sarcasm in her tone, no anger, just a strange, clear sadness. A weight carried in her eyes that most 10-year-olds hadn't earned. She looked directly at him, as though she were trying to understand something even she wasn't sure of. That's the moment this story begins. But to truly understand how we got here, to this moment of curiosity, confusion, and quiet awe, you need to understand the girl behind the question. Her name is Emily Carter. She was 10 years old, born in a small, fading town in northern Alabama where people still left their doors unlocked but hope had long since moved out. Her story isn't about rockets, not really. It's about fire. The kind that burns from within, the kind you can't see until it's needed most. And that fire didn't start in Austin. It started years earlier, in a bedroom barely large enough to fit a mattress and a bookshelf with more dust than books. Emily wasn't a typical child. While other kids chased lightning bugs in the summer, she watched YouTube videos about physics, black holes, and quantum entanglement. She asked questions her teachers couldn't answer. She built gadgets from toaster parts and plastic spoons. She was strange, brilliant, and mostly alone. Her mom, Sarah Carter, worked double shifts at the diner and cleaned motel rooms on weekends. Her father? He'd left when Emily was 3, leaving behind a single photograph and the smell of engine oil. They lived paycheck to paycheck, and some months, not even that. Emily's hoodie, the same one she wore to the summit, had belonged to her mom in high school. She wore it like armor. She didn't want to be noticed, not usually. But when she saw the flyer for the SpaceX Innovator Contest tacked to the school bulletin board, something stirred. The contest asked for letters, just letters. "Tell us your biggest idea," it read, "and why you think you should be at the Future Innovators Summit." Emily wrote hers in one sitting. It wasn't polished. It wasn't formal. But it was real. She wrote about how she built a miniature hydroponic system from an old coffee can and a broken fan. She wrote about her dream of creating affordable, sustainable housing modules for homeless families. But mostly, she wrote about being invisible. "Everyone sees Mars," she wrote, "but no one sees me." She didn't expect a reply. Weeks passed. Then one day after school, her mom was waiting on the porch, waving a red envelope. "You better sit down," she said. "Elon Musk wants to meet you." Emily thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. The letter was real. The invitation was real. A plane ticket was enclosed, one for Emily, and one for Sarah. They'd never flown before. They'd never even left the state. Sarah cried for an hour, partly from pride, partly from fear. They had nothing to wear, nothing fancy anyway. Sarah borrowed a suitcase from her neighbor. Emily packed 2 books, her letter, and a pair of socks she thought looked future-ish. The night before the summit, they shared a motel bed just outside Austin. Emily couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Do you think he'll even notice me?" Sarah pulled her closer. "If he doesn't, he's not as smart as everyone says." The next morning came too quickly. Emily felt sick to her stomach as they walked through the grand doors of the auditorium. Other kids had handlers, parents in suits, folders filled with patents. Emily had a duct-taped notebook and hope. That was it. The Q&A moved fast. She almost didn't raise her hand. She thought about staying quiet. What could she possibly say that would matter? But something in her burned. That fire again. So she raised her hand. And when her turn came, she didn't read a question from paper. She didn't recite facts. She just said what she felt. "Mr. Musk, if you're trying to save humanity, how come no one's saving kids like me?" That single question didn't just silence a room, it ignited a story. A story that would stretch across headlines, inspire debates, and eventually find its way into schools, homes, and boardrooms. But for now, in that moment, it was just a girl, a hoodie, and a room too quiet for comfort. Elon finally found his voice. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," she replied. He nodded slowly. "Emily, I don't have a good answer. But maybe you just gave me a reason to find one." That was the beginning. The beginning of everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Her name was Emily Carter, and long before she stood in front of Elon Musk with the world watching, she had already survived more than most adults. She was born on a rainy Tuesday in April in a town so small it didn't have its own stoplight. Folks in Oak Ridge, Alabama, lived quiet lives marked by routine, church on Sundays, meatloaf Mondays, and the kind of silence in the air that made dreams feel too loud. Emily was never quiet, though. Not in her mind. From the time she could talk, she asked questions no one wanted to answer. Why is the sky blue? Why do people pretend to like each other? Where did Daddy go? Her mother, Sarah, always tried to answer, even when it hurt. Sarah was 21 when she had Emily. She worked at a gas station during the day and waitressed at a diner at night, barely making enough to cover rent on the tiny 2-bedroom house she rented on Sycamore Street. It had peeling paint, squeaky floors, and a roof that whined every time it rained. But it was theirs, and it was safe, and it was full of love. Sarah never finished college. She was a brilliant writer once, won a statewide contest in high school, but life changed when Emily came along. The father, Daniel Carter, had been a quiet, intense man who loved engines and beer in equal measure. He had promise, once. Talked about being an engineer. But he drank that promise away, and by the time Emily was 3, he was gone. No warning. No note. Just an empty toolbox and an emptier bedroom. Emily didn't remember much about him. A laugh maybe, the smell of oil and burnt coffee, the way his arms felt too big when they hugged her. What she remembered more was the way her mom looked when she thought no one was watching. The exhaustion in her eyes. The worry she tried to bury behind fake smiles. Emily learned early how to be self-sufficient. She'd make cereal for herself in the morning, brush her own hair, and pack her own bag for school. She'd sit on the front steps after the bus dropped her off, waiting for Sarah to get home. Sometimes, Sarah wouldn't make it until dark, and Emily would just sit under the porch light reading old library books about space and invention. She didn't mind being alone. Her mind was a playground. She liked breaking things to see how they worked. Radios, clocks, old fans. She once took apart a broken vacuum and turned it into a pet feeding robot. It sort of worked. The dog hated it, but Emily beamed with pride. School was complicated. Emily was smart, too smart. Her teachers praised her on paper but sighed behind her back. She'd ask questions during lessons that derailed the curriculum. Once, in 3rd grade, she corrected the teacher's math on the board. The room fell silent. The teacher smiled thinly, but Emily could feel the ice in her tone when she said, "Why don't you save the answers for the test next time, Emily?" After that, kids called her calculator girl or brain freeze. They didn't mean it kindly. She tried to fit in. She really did. But while they were gossiping about TikTok dances, she was trying to design a wind-powered water pump from soda bottles. She felt like she was on the wrong planet. Her only real friend was her neighbor, Ricky, a quiet boy with a limp who collected bottle caps and loved reading about dinosaurs. He didn't talk much, but he listened. He was the first person Emily showed her notebook to, the one where she kept her inventions. She wrote in it every night. Ideas for solar umbrellas, recycling drones, air cleaning bus filters. Ricky said she was gonna be famous someday. Emily laughed and said, "Yeah right, I'll probably just fix toasters for a living." "Then you'll fix the best damn toasters," he'd reply with a grin. Things at home weren't easy, but they weren't bad. Sarah did everything she could. She skipped meals so Emily could eat. She took extra shifts. She lied to the landlord about rent and patched their roof with duct tape and determination. But one winter, the diner laid off half its staff. Sarah came home with a pink slip and a quiet rage in her eyes. "We're gonna be okay," she told Emily, but her voice cracked. That was the first night Emily heard her cry through the wall. She sat there in the dark, clutching her notebook like it could solve something. It was during that cold winter that Emily really leaned into her inventions. Not for fun, but for survival. She made a heater out of a coffee can, candles, and bricks. She fixed the broken stove. She wired a flashlight to a switch in the closet so her mom wouldn't trip coming in late. It wasn't about being smart. It was about being necessary. And through it all, Emily dreamed of space. It started when she was 5 and saw a documentary about the moon landing. Then came the Mars rovers. The Falcon 9. Elon Musk. She didn't understand all of it, but she knew this: space was big, and she felt small. But in space, being small didn't matter. What mattered was curiosity, courage, and the willingness to dream past your neighborhood. She printed out pictures of rockets and taped them above her bed. She wrote Elon Musk a letter when she was 7, asking if she could help him build a house on Mars. She never got a reply. But she kept writing. She told no one. Not even Ricky. That was her dream, and dreams were delicate things. If you showed them too early, people might laugh. And laughter had a way of cutting deeper than silence. Things reached a low point when the landlord posted an eviction notice on their door. Emily came home from school to find her mom sitting on the kitchen floor, bills scattered like snow. Sarah looked up and tried to smile. "Just a bump in the road," she said. But Emily knew better. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought, what would Elon Musk do? The next day, she saw the flyer at school. The SpaceX Future Innovators Summit. She tore it off the board and ran all the way home. Sarah read it carefully. "Letters only," she murmured. "No entry fee. Maybe they'll read yours." So Emily sat down and wrote. She wrote about being invisible, about duct-taped windows, about the heater she built from scrap. She wrote about her dreams and her fears, and how sometimes they were the same thing. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She didn't know how. Then she folded the letter, kissed it like it was alive, and dropped it in the mailbox. Weeks passed. She forgot about it. Life moved on, barely. Then the envelope came. A red one. Thick paper. The return address read, SpaceX headquarters. Sarah opened it first. Her hand trembled. She gasped. "Emily," she whispered. "They chose you." Emily stared at the letter, then at her mom, then back again. "Is this real?" she asked. "It's real," Sarah said. "You're going to Austin." Emily didn't know whether to scream or cry. She did both. In that moment, the weight of everything, the loneliness, the struggle, the not belonging, it all lifted, just a little. She wasn't invisible anymore. Someone had seen her. Someone who mattered. But more importantly, someone who built rockets thought she might build something too. Maybe not rockets. Maybe not yet. But something. Something that could lift people up. Maybe even save someone. Just like her mom saved her. And that's how Emily Carter, the girl from nowhere, got her ticket to everything. The girl who asked questions too big for her town. The girl who built heat from scraps. The girl who never stopped dreaming. She was about to step onto a stage she didn't ask for, into a spotlight she didn't expect. And everything was about to change. Emily Carter's story wasn't built from miracles or luck, it was stitched together from bruised mornings and long nights where the light didn't come from stars, but from the small lamp she kept on her nightstand while everyone else slept. To the outside world, she might have looked like just another kid from a struggling town, but if you followed the threads of her life, you'd see where it started to fray. The conflict didn't begin on a grand stage or in front of cameras. It started in 4th grade when Emily was 9 and the world around her began to tighten like a knot. She had always been different, but that was the year when different turned into something dangerous in the eyes of other kids. Her teacher, Mrs. Tillman, didn't like being corrected, and when Emily pointed out an error in a science presentation, a simple mistake in a diagram about energy transfer, the class laughed, but Mrs. Tillman did not. That was the day Emily began to be marked. Not with red ink or detention slips, but with silence, with stares that lingered too long, with group projects where no one wanted her in their team. She tried to laugh it off. She tried to blend in. She even tried to make a joke once, imitating a cartoon character the other girls liked, but her timing was off and the laugh didn't land and one of the girls rolled her eyes and said, "You try way too hard, brainiac." At lunch, Emily sat alone. Ricky had moved away that spring when his dad found work in Georgia, and she felt that absence like a tooth knocked loose. She still kept a spot open for him at the lunch table out of habit. Kids began to whisper when she walked down the hall. She heard her name in sentences that ended in giggles or eye rolls. The worst was when they didn't even try to hide it. One day, she opened her locker and a piece of notebook paper fluttered out. It had a crude drawing of a rocket crashing into a landfill, with the words, "Mission Failure," scrawled across the top. She didn't cry. She didn't tell anyone. She folded the paper neatly, placed it in her backpack, and went to class. But that night, she didn't touch her invention journal. She just stared at the ceiling and wondered if maybe they were right. At home, Sarah was working harder than ever, pulling double shifts again and eating whatever Emily left behind at dinner. They talked less, not because they didn't want to, but because time had become a luxury. Emily didn't want to worry her mom, so she kept the school stuff to herself. She smiled when she had to. She lied when she had to. "How's school, baby?" Sarah would ask. Same as always, Emily would say. Just busy. It wasn't all bad. There were moments, tiny, shining moments, that kept her going. Like the time she helped the school janitor fix the broken drinking fountain and he gave her a thumbs up and said, "You're gonna do something big someday, I can feel it." Or when she found an old radio in the garbage behind the library and brought it back to life with copper wire and a battery pack, and for 3 nights in a row, it picked up weather broadcasts from 3 counties over. Those moments mattered. They stitched her back together. But nothing cut deeper than what happened at the science fair. The school held it every spring in the gym, and Emily had been preparing for months. She created a prototype of a zero-gravity composting unit, inspired by a documentary she watched about sustainability in space habitats. She used a rotating chamber, magnets, and a controlled release valve made from a broken drip coffee pot. It worked. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. She practiced her explanation every night, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, making sure she didn't talk too fast, didn't sound too eager. She wore her best outfit that day, a plain blue sweater with sleeves too short and black jeans that had been patched twice at the knees. She set up her project carefully, smiled at every judge, answered questions with poise. She felt proud. And for a second, just 1 second, she let herself believe she might actually win. But then came Brandon Whitaker. Brandon was the golden boy of the school, tall, charming, always the one who raised his hand just enough times to be impressive but not annoying. His parents were on the school board. His older brother had gotten a robotics scholarship. Brandon's project? A water filtration system. Simple. Clean. Suspiciously familiar. Emily stared at it for a full minute before realizing, he'd copied her concept from an idea she had explained during a class brainstorming session weeks earlier. She told him about it because she thought maybe, just maybe, someone finally wanted to collaborate. He must have taken notes. Tweaked a few things. Made it slicker. Gave it a title that sounded like something from a tech startup, Hydropure. He smiled when he walked past her display, like he knew she wouldn't do anything. And she didn't. The judges gave him the blue ribbon. She got honorable mention and a handshake. That night, she didn't speak during dinner. Sarah noticed. It didn't go well, she asked gently. Emily shook her head. I should have known better, she said. Some people just, always win. Sarah leaned across the table. You're not some people. And you're not done yet. A blue ribbon isn't the end of anything. Emily nodded, but the fire inside her flickered. For the first time, she wondered if maybe dreaming wasn't enough. Maybe being smart wasn't enough. Maybe people like Brandon were always going to win because they didn't care who they stepped on to get there. Maybe the world didn't reward originality, it rewarded polish, confidence, access. Emily didn't touch her journal for a week. She started to throw it away once, but something in her stopped. Maybe it was her mother's voice echoing in her mind. Maybe it was the look on Brandon's face that said, "You'll stay here, and I'll move on." Whatever it was, it pulled her back. She flipped open the journal and scribbled across the top of a blank page, "Ideas they can't steal." And beneath that, a list. A list of problems no one was solving. Clean air in polluted cities. Solar-powered shelter pods. Low-cost learning kits for rural schools. And finally, scrawled in all caps, "Make something that helps kids like me." She didn't know it then, but that line would change everything. That line was the seed of the question she'd one day ask Elon Musk. The question that would turn her into a symbol for something far bigger than herself. But before it became a question, it was a statement of frustration. A plea to be seen. And in the weeks that followed, Emily threw herself into her work like a girl possessed. She built, tested, rewired, learned from failure. She stayed up late watching videos of engineers, tutorials from MIT, interviews with innovators who looked nothing like the people in her school. And the more she learned, the less she cared about fitting in. That's when she saw the flyer. Taped to the school bulletin board, half covered by a notice about a bake sale. Future Innovators Summit, hosted by SpaceX. Write us a letter. Tell us your big idea. She didn't think. She just grabbed it, ran home, and started writing. The words came fast. It wasn't just a letter. It was her truth on paper. And it ended with one sentence: if the future is really for everyone, then why do so many kids like me feel like we'll never get there? She didn't know it then, but that sentence was the fuse. Everything that came before, the loneliness, the loss, the stolen ideas, the late night soldering wires and wondering if she mattered, it had all led here. And when the invitation came weeks later, sealed in red and marked with the SpaceX logo, it didn't feel like a door opening. It felt like the sky itself had cracked, just wide enough for someone like her to step through. Emily Carter was going to Austin. And this time, she wasn't just bringing her ideas. She was bringing her fire. The morning they flew to Austin, Emily woke up before the sun, not out of excitement but because her stomach was a tight knot of nerves and questions she didn't know how to ask. The sky outside was still dark, the motel room quiet except for the low hum of the heater and the slow, even breathing of her mother asleep in the next bed. She sat up, swung her legs over the edge of the mattress, and looked at her reflection in the motel window. She didn't feel like a genius or an innovator or whatever the flyer had called her. She just felt like a kid wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and sneakers with the soles coming apart. The night before, Sarah had stayed up late going over the schedule with her. Check-in at 9, orientation at 10, lunch, then the panel with Mr. Musk, she'd said, pointing at the laminated badge with Emily's name on it. Emily Carter. Finalist. She kept staring at that badge long after her mom had turned out the light. Now, as the first orange slivers of daylight crept over the horizon, she held it in her hand like it might disappear. The Uber ride to the conference center was quiet. Sarah sipped coffee from a gas station cup and tapped her foot nervously, her eyes scanning the buildings outside like they might reveal something she wasn't ready for. Emily clutched her notebook in her lap and watched the city wake up around her. Austin felt loud and wide and fast, so different from Oak Ridge it was like stepping onto another planet. The conference center rose up like a spaceship itself, sleek, glass-paneled, and buzzing with people. Kids and parents and journalists and volunteers in bright-colored shirts darted through the lobby like particles in motion. Emily tightened her grip on her notebook and followed her mom toward the check-in desk. Her badge was scanned, her wrist was stamped, and just like that, she was inside. The first thing she noticed was the sound. Not just noise, but ideas. Kids talking about designs and code and machines they were building, adults discussing funding and scholarships and accelerator programs. There were prototype booths lining the main hall, 3D printers running in a demo lab, a robot dog walking in circles and making small children scream with delight. Emily's senses were overloaded. She felt both invisible and too visible, like someone had dropped her into the middle of a place where she belonged on paper but not in person. But then a girl in a NASA hoodie smiled at her and said, "Cool notebook," and something in Emily's chest loosened. She nodded back, whispered a thanks, and kept walking. Orientation was held in a large side hall with a giant LED screen that read, "Welcome, Future Makers." The keynote speaker, a woman from MIT who had designed water purifiers for refugee camps, spoke with such calm, clear purpose that Emily forgot to be nervous for a few minutes. The speaker ended with a line that hit her hard: "The world doesn't change all at once. It changes one idea at a time. Maybe yours is next." After orientation, she and Sarah found a quiet spot near a display of autonomous drones. Sarah handed her a granola bar and whispered, "You doing okay?" Emily nodded, but her throat was dry. "I feel like I'm supposed to be someone else," she said softly. "Like they're gonna figure out I'm just me." Sarah leaned in and looked her dead in the eye. "You being you is the reason you're here. Don't shrink now." Emily looked away, trying to hold that truth like it was a warm cup she didn't want to spill. The panel with Elon Musk was the main event. It was scheduled for 1:30 p.m. in the Grand Auditorium. A domed space with lights rigged into the ceiling like constellations and 3 wide projection screens that looped footage of rockets and Mars simulations. There were nearly 500 people in the audience, many of them finalists, a few lucky teachers, and even a couple of celebrity guests Emily only recognized from YouTube. They filed into their seats slowly, and the air buzzed with the kind of energy you get when you know something big is about to happen. Elon Musk arrived 5 minutes late, walking in from the side of the stage without fanfare, wearing a black jacket and jeans and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He waved, took a seat in the middle of a curved table, and nodded at the moderator, a tech journalist from Wired. The first 10 minutes were predictable. Musk talked about Mars, reusable rockets, sustainable energy, and AI. The audience was rapt, but Emily felt something strange, like she was watching a show she'd seen a dozen times before. Then came the Q&A. The moderator pointed toward the audience. We've asked several young finalists to prepare questions. Let's hear from a few now. Hands shot up. A kid in a bow tie asked about colonizing Titan. Another in thick glasses asked if Neuralink could be used to help kids with learning disabilities. A girl from San Francisco asked if Tesla would ever make a solar-powered plane. Each question was impressive. Each answer polished. Emily hesitated. She had a question written down in her notebook, something about energy grids and microstorage systems, but it didn't feel right anymore. She stared at the page and then looked up. The moderator pointed to someone. Not her. Then again. Still not her. Then, finally, Elon leaned forward and pointed directly at her. You, in the blue hoodie. What's your question? And suddenly it wasn't just a moment, it was the moment. She stood slowly. Her heart thudded in her ears. She wasn't sure what she was going to say. The question she had rehearsed melted from her mind. Instead, she heard her own voice say something else. Mr. Musk, if you're trying to save humanity, how come no one's saving kids like me? The words hung in the air. Audible, yes, but more than that, they were undeniable. They echoed off the stage, bounced off the ceiling, and rippled through the audience like a wave of silence. Every head turned. Every camera locked in. And Elon paused. Not like someone collecting his thoughts, but like someone who had been hit with something he didn't see coming. He blinked, leaned forward, and said quietly, "Can you say that again?" Emily repeated herself. Her voice didn't tremble this time. How come no one's saving kids like me? The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. As if the audience, the panelists, and Elon himself knew instinctively that something true had just been said. Elon looked at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he asked, "What's your name?" "Emily Carter," she said. "From Oak Ridge, Alabama." He nodded. "Emily. I don't have a good answer. But maybe you just gave me a reason to find one." It was a good response. Not perfect, but honest. The room breathed again. Applause broke out, unsure at first, then building. Emily sat down slowly, her legs shaking. She couldn't tell if it had gone well or terribly. Her mom reached out and grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. Her eyes were glassy. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." After the panel, everything moved fast. Journalists swarmed. One from CNN asked for an interview. A producer from a popular science podcast handed her a business card. A volunteer whispered, "He wants to meet you backstage." "He?" Emily asked. "Mr. Musk," the volunteer said. "Right now." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Go," she whispered. "Just be you." Emily stood, her notebook still clutched tightly, and followed the volunteer through a side door, down a hall that smelled like carpet cleaner and anticipation. She didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't know what Elon Musk was going to say. All she knew was that she had spoken her truth in front of a room full of strangers and it had landed like a spark in dry grass. Something had caught. Something was burning. And nothing would be the same after this. The hallway leading to the backstage room wasn't long, but to Emily it felt endless, each step echoing in her ears like a countdown to something irreversible. The volunteer walking beside her was saying something, maybe about protocol, maybe about security, but Emily couldn't hear a word of it. Her fingers tightened around her notebook like it was armor. At the end of the hall stood a black door with a silver handle, guarded by a tall man in a headset who barely glanced at her before nodding and opening it. Inside was quieter than she expected. The room smelled faintly of citrus and new carpet. A table with bottled water and protein bars sat in the corner. And in the middle of the room, standing near a digital display of the Mars habitat prototype, was Elon Musk. He turned as she entered, not smiling but not stern either, just watching her with that curious intensity he was known for. "Emily," he said simply, as if they were already mid-conversation. She nodded. "Hi." For a moment, there was silence again. Then he motioned to a chair and sat across from her. "You caught me off guard back there," he said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "That doesn't happen a lot." Emily didn't know if that was a compliment or an accusation. She stayed standing. "I didn't mean to embarrass you." "You didn't," he said, shaking his head. "You did something better. You made me think." Emily's heart was pounding, but she met his gaze. "I meant what I said. There are a lot of kids who are smart and full of ideas, but no one sees us. No one gives us a shot unless we're from the right places or wearing the right clothes or saying the right words." Elon nodded slowly. "Yeah. That's a problem. And it's not just about tech or science, it's about access. Opportunity. The starting line isn't the same for everyone." "Exactly," Emily said, and now the words came easier. "You talk about sending people to Mars, but I know kids who've never been 10 miles out of their own town. You want to build the future, but half the future can't afford a laptop. How are we supposed to catch up if we're always 10 steps behind?" Elon was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat back and looked up at the ceiling like he was searching for a satellite. "You're not wrong," he said finally. "But what you're asking, what you're pointing at, it's big. It's systemic. I can't fix poverty with a rocket." "No," Emily said, her voice clear. "But maybe you can build a launch pad that starts here. On Earth. For kids like me." That sentence hung in the air. Elon tilted his head. "What would that look like, Emily? If I gave you a blank check and a team, what would you build?" She blinked. That wasn't a question she'd prepared for. But the answer was already inside her. "I'd start small. A mobile lab. Solar-powered. Packed with 3D printers, sensors, coding kits, things that make kids curious again. It would visit towns like mine. Give kids hands-on learning, not just YouTube videos. And not just once, a real follow-up. A network. A mentorship program. Online hubs with shared data, a way for kids to contribute to real science projects from anywhere. Even Oak Ridge." Elon's eyes sharpened. "That's not a dream. That's a plan." Emily shrugged. "I've had time to think." "What would you call it?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "Ground control." A smile flickered across Elon's face. "You've got marketing instincts too." She smiled back, surprised by herself. "I've had to sell a lot of crazy ideas to my mom. She's a tougher audience." He stood now, pacing a little, hands in his pockets. "Let me ask you something, Emily. Why do you care so much? Most kids your age just want to go viral or play games or hang out. What makes you different? That was the question no one had asked. The question buried deepest. And when she answered, her voice was soft but certain. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. To be smart and still feel like you don't matter. And I don't want the next kid like me to give up before they even get started. He was silent again, but it was the kind of silence that meant something was shifting. Then, with no ceremony, no drama, he pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. I'm going to set up a meeting, he said. My foundation's director. A few engineers. We'll talk next steps. And I want you to be there. Emily's eyes widened. Me? Yes, he said. It's your idea. Your fire. They need to hear it from you. But I'm just a kid, she said before she could stop herself. Elon looked at her hard. You're the only one in that whole room who asked the right question. That makes you more than just a kid. She didn't know what to say. Her heart was pounding so loud she thought he might hear it. Then, softly, she said, "Thank you." He nodded, then reached out and shook her hand. "We'll talk soon, Emily Carter." And just like that, it was over. She walked back into the hallway like someone emerging from a dream, still clutching her notebook like a lifeline. When she saw her mom waiting near the exit, her knees almost buckled. Sarah ran to her, arms around her in seconds. "What did he say?" she asked. Emily looked up, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "He said yes." The rest of the day passed in a blur, handshakes, photos, quick interviews, but none of it felt real until they were back in the motel, sitting on the bed, the room filled with golden evening light. Sarah was staring at her like she was seeing her for the first time. "You did that," she said. "You really did that." Emily nodded. She felt tired in a way that went beyond her body. Like something inside her had finally let go of a weight it had carried for years. "I was so scared," she admitted. "But when I started talking, it felt like the truth had been waiting to come out." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Sarah said. One moment. One sentence. One girl brave enough to say it out loud. That night, Emily didn't write in her notebook. She just held it against her chest and watched the stars through the motel window. She thought about Oak Ridge. About Ricky. About the kids at school who laughed when she talked about space. And then she thought about ground control. A lab on wheels. A door to the sky. A place where being different didn't mean being left behind. Somewhere out there, a new beginning had been sparked. And it had started with a question. The next morning started differently. There was no alarm clock, no early bus to catch, no school bell ringing in her ears. Instead, Emily woke up to the sound of her mom humming in the bathroom, something soft and hopeful, like the tune she used to sing when Emily was little and afraid of storms. Light streamed through the thin motel curtains, painting golden stripes across the floor. Emily sat up slowly, blinking into the new day, still half expecting to discover that everything had just been a really vivid dream. But then she saw her notebook on the nightstand, the SpaceX guest badge still clipped to it, and the memory of what she'd said, what she'd done, what Elon Musk had promised, all of it rushed back with the weight of reality. Sarah came out of the bathroom holding 2 paper cups of motel coffee, one of which she handed to Emily like it was a trophy. "You want the good news or the good news?" she asked. Emily raised an eyebrow, trying not to smile. "Both, I guess." "Good news number 1, Sarah said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "you're going to California. Musk's assistant emailed me at 6 this morning. They're flying us out next week for a formal planning meeting with his team. Round trip, hotel, meals, all covered." Emily's mouth dropped open. "You're kidding." "I'm not. We're booked." "Good news number 2, Sarah said, handing Emily her phone, "check your email." Emily tapped it open and saw the subject line right away, CNN interview request, Emily Carter. Her stomach flipped. They want me to go on live TV. No pressure, Sarah said with a wink. Emily groaned and fell back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling in disbelief. It wasn't just that people were listening now, it was that they cared. For the first time in her life, people with real power were not only hearing her voice but asking for more. Later that afternoon, as they packed up their things and prepared to check out of the motel, a reporter from a local Austin news station showed up to do a short segment on her. He was kind, patient, asked thoughtful questions, and filmed a few shots of her flipping through her invention notebook, highlighting old sketches and new ideas. When he asked her, "Do you think what you said changed anything?" she didn't pause. "I think it started something," she replied. "The rest is up to what we build now." On the flight back to Alabama, Emily stared out the window as clouds drifted by beneath her like distant cities. Her fingers tapped absently against the plastic armrest while her mind raced. She thought about ground control. She thought about her old school, about Brandon and Mrs. Tillman and all the people who never gave her a second glance. But more than anything, she thought about the kids. The ones she hadn't met yet. The ones who were just like her, quiet, curious, underestimated. What if one lab on wheels could spark 1,000 futures? What if one voice could turn into a chorus? When they landed in Montgomery, the sun was just beginning to set, turning the sky a soft orange-pink. Sarah held her hand as they walked through the terminal, and for once, neither of them had to say anything. They both knew the world had shifted. Back home in Oak Ridge, things didn't return to normal. Because normal was gone now. The first morning back, a small crowd was waiting outside their front door, a reporter from the local paper, a photographer from Birmingham, and a few neighbors who had seen the story online and brought over casseroles and homemade signs. One woman from down the street, who Emily barely knew, handed Sarah an envelope with $50 in it. "For travel expenses," she said. What your girl said, it meant something. At school, things were different too. Kids who never spoke to her before now stared at her in the hallway like she was someone out of a movie. A few tried to talk to her between classes, awkwardly asking about Elon Musk or pretending they'd always liked her. Even Mrs. Tillman seemed softer, though she still couldn't quite meet Emily's eyes. Brandon kept his distance, avoiding her completely, which honestly suited Emily just fine. She didn't want revenge. She wanted progress. That Friday, the principal called a special assembly and asked Emily to speak to the school. She stood in front of the gymnasium, holding the microphone with both hands, her voice shaking slightly as she began. "A lot of you know what happened last week," she said. "Some of you probably saw the video. But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. About what happens when someone decides your zip code is more important than your brain. About what changes when we start asking the right questions." She paused and looked around the room. Every kid in this gym has something inside them that matters. And maybe we don't all get the same chances. But we do get a choice. We get to believe in ourselves even when it's hard. Even when no one else does. That's what I'm doing. And that's what I hope you'll do too. The room was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, applause started to build. Not polite, forced applause. Real applause. Thunderous, rising, echoing off the gym walls. For the first time, Emily felt the difference between being noticed and being respected. That weekend, she received a box in the mail with a return address from Hawthorne, California. Inside were 2 hoodies, both with the SpaceX logo, a pair of digital safety goggles, and a handwritten note on sleek white cardstock. "Emily, this is just the beginning. Keep building. Keep asking. We'll be ready." She read the note twice. Then she hung it on the wall above her desk. Monday came quickly, and with it, the call with Musk's foundation team. Emily sat in front of Sarah's old laptop, flanked by 2 borrowed desk lamps to give her face proper lighting. On the screen were 4 windows, one for the director of the Musk Foundation, one for a senior engineer at Tesla, one for an educational outreach coordinator from SpaceX, and one for Elon himself. The meeting began formally, with introductions and pleasantries, but it didn't take long for Emily to jump in. She laid out her vision for ground control clearly, passionately, even boldly. Detailing the hardware required, the learning modules, the target regions, and even a proposed beta test in Oak Ridge. She spoke not like a 10-year-old hoping to be taken seriously, but like someone who already knew what was needed. At one point, the engineer from Tesla interrupted. "I just want to say," he said, "this is one of the most coherent and grounded pitches I've ever seen. And I've been in product meetings for 15 years. Elon smiled, and Emily caught the briefest flicker of pride on his face. "I told you," he said. "She's not here to play." By the end of the call, there were commitments, real ones. Funding for a prototype. A dedicated design team. Monthly check-ins. And a launch date set for 12 months out. Emily logged off the call feeling like she was floating. Not in space. In something bigger. Purpose. Possibility. That night, she and Sarah made microwave popcorn and sat on the couch watching old NASA documentaries, the volume low, the captions on. Every few minutes, Sarah would glance over and smile without saying anything. It was enough. They both knew something had started. Not just for Emily. For everyone who had ever been told they weren't ready. A week later, CNN flew them to Atlanta for a televised interview. Emily sat on the soundstage in a new outfit donated by a local charity and answered questions with the same quiet strength that had first caught the world's attention. When the anchor asked, "What do you hope people remember about this moment?" she didn't pause. "That anyone can change something," she said. "Even a kid from nowhere." And as the lights dimmed and the credits rolled, millions of people across the country watched her face and saw not just a girl, but a force. A catalyst. A spark that could not be ignored. By the time spring arrived in Oak Ridge, Emily Carter was no longer just a name whispered around town, she was a name being said out loud on news broadcasts, in classrooms, and across boardrooms. But for Emily, fame was a strange thing. It hadn't changed how dusty their porch got or how the faucet still sputtered before water came out or how Sarah sometimes stared too long at unpaid bills spread across the kitchen table. But it had changed how people looked at her, some with admiration, some with doubt, and some, like Principal Granger, with a cautious kind of pride, like maybe he'd underestimated her one time too many. Emily stayed grounded, mostly because she had no other choice. Her mornings were still filled with cereal and mismatched socks, and her afternoons were now packed with Zoom meetings and prototype discussions. She spent hours sketching designs for the ground control mobile lab, carefully layering her notebook pages with detailed blueprints, color-coded supply lists, and notes on how to make the experience engaging for kids like the ones she knew best, the quiet, curious, often overlooked ones. Her first Zoom meeting with the SpaceX engineering liaison, Priya Desai, had been nerve-wracking. Priya was sharp-eyed, fast-talking, and had a way of making even silence feel like an exam. But Emily had quickly learned that Priya respected preparation over polish, and she earned that respect the second she shared her concept for a hands-on, self-sustaining STEM ecosystem on wheels. Emily's idea wasn't just theoretical. It was a living thing in her head, powered by solar panels, lined with fold-out learning stations, mobile connectivity hubs, augmented reality microscopes, and even a VR corner where kids could experience things like Mars terrain walks or human anatomy explorations. Priya had been impressed. "You're not just trying to build access," she said after their second meeting. "You're building aspiration." That phrase stuck with Emily. She wrote it in big capital letters on her whiteboard, "Build aspiration." Every night after dinner, she and Sarah would huddle around their beat-up laptop and research grant funding, sourcing materials, and school partnerships. They built a growing spreadsheet with tabs for costs, schedules, and possible routes. They reached out to local teachers, rural school principals, and community centers. Some responded with enthusiasm. Others seemed skeptical. But Emily didn't let it shake her. One evening, while working on a grant proposal, Sarah looked over at her and asked, "Do you ever miss being just a regular 10-year-old?" Emily thought about it. "I don't think I ever was one," she said simply. That answer hit Sarah harder than she let on. She reached over and squeezed Emily's hand, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. A few days later, they received an email from the Musk Foundation with the official green light for the prototype. The subject line read, "Let's launch." Inside was a digital check for $150,000, earmarked for the first ground control lab. Emily stared at it like it was a treasure map. Sarah, standing behind her, whispered, "Well, kiddo. I guess it's real now." They celebrated that night with takeout pizza and root beer floats, dancing in the kitchen to a dusty old Bluetooth speaker. It was one of the rare nights where laughter came easy and everything felt possible. The next few weeks moved fast. A small workshop in Birmingham offered their space for free prototyping. A solar tech company agreed to donate panels. A former NASA education consultant volunteered to help design curriculum modules tailored for mobile learning. The little lab on wheels was starting to become more than drawings and dreams, it was becoming tangible. Meanwhile, Emily kept getting letters. Dozens turned to hundreds. Some were handwritten in crayon, others typed with perfect punctuation. They came from kids in Nebraska, Texas, Michigan, even Alaska. One said, "I didn't know girls like us could talk to people like Elon Musk." Another said, "You made me want to try again." Emily read every single one. She kept them in a shoebox under her bed, the edges worn from how often she pulled it out. One morning, a letter arrived from a girl named Layla in Baltimore. It read, "My brother says no one listens to girls like me, but I told him you're proof they do. When ground control comes to our city, I want to be your assistant. Can I?" Emily smiled and wrote back that same day. "Yes, Layla. And not just my assistant. Maybe one day you'll build your own lab too." Amid all the progress, challenges started to surface. A supplier backed out. The first van they inspected had a busted transmission. Someone on social media began accusing Emily of being a puppet for billionaires, saying the whole thing was a publicity stunt. That one stung more than she expected. She stayed off the internet for a few days, focusing instead on what she could control, her work, her designs, her vision. Sarah tried to help, but there were moments when it was clear the pressure was piling high. One night, Emily burst into tears after a long call where a city councilman condescendingly told her to let the grown-ups handle logistics. She cried not because she believed him, but because she knew too many people still did. Sarah sat beside her, brushing her hair back, whispering, "Just keep showing up. Let your work speak louder than their doubts." Slowly, the pieces came together. The lab vehicle was secured, a retrofitted school bus donated by a non-profit and painted white with a sleek ground control logo along the side. Solar panels were installed on the roof. Inside, shelves were lined with microcontrollers, robotics kits, chemistry sets, and mini 3D printers. There was even a collapsible dome for stargazing with a built-in telescope and guided software. Priya and her team visited Alabama to walk through the finished prototype, and when they stepped inside for the first time, Emily watched their faces light up. "This doesn't feel like a classroom," Priya said. "It feels like a spaceship." Emily grinned. "That's the idea." They launched the pilot program in Oak Ridge first. The parking lot behind Emily's school was transformed into a mini event site with music, banners, and booths. Kids who had once teased her now stood wide-eyed as they walked through the lab, touching equipment they'd only seen in textbooks. One boy, a third grader, pulled on Emily's sleeve and whispered, "Can I really be a scientist?" She knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said, "You already are." Parents came too, many of them skeptical at first, unsure what to expect. But by the end of the day, they were asking how to get more sessions, more access, more chances for their kids. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the crowd thinned out, Emily sat alone in the lab. She looked around at the blinking LED lights, the glowing touchscreens, the faint hum of cooling fans. She could still hear the echoes of laughter, the gasps of awe, the soft scribble of dreams being drawn for the first time. She pulled out her notebook, opened to a fresh page, and wrote one sentence across the top in capital letters: "This is what hope looks like." Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Elon. Just 2 words: keep going. She smiled, closed the notebook, and whispered to herself, "I will." The next phase of ground control didn't begin with fireworks or a press release. It started quietly, with a GPS ping and the rumble of tires on gravel as the mobile lab pulled out of Oak Ridge for the first time. Emily stood in the doorway of the bus with her hand braced on the frame, watching her hometown shrink behind her through the back window. Sarah was driving, sunglasses on, humming along to the oldies station. The seats were filled with donated gear, field kits, and a small team of volunteers. A grad student from Auburn, a retired teacher who believed in second chances, and even Ricky, who had come around after the pilot and now helped run the robotics modules. Emily hadn't expected him to change his mind, but one day he'd shown up at the bus, handed her a soldering tool, and muttered, "You're right. Kids like us need this." That had been enough. Their first stop was a town called Harlan, population 2,100, tucked into the hills of northern Mississippi. The local school had no STEM program, one outdated computer lab, and a science teacher who doubled as the janitor. When the bus arrived, kids peeked out from behind fences and screen doors. At first, it was just curiosity. Then it became something more. Over the next 3 days, ground control transformed the empty schoolyard into a hub of discovery. Kids who'd never seen a microscope stared at bacteria cultures like they were looking at magic. Girls who'd been told to stop asking questions now held soldering irons and built circuits. A boy named Aiden designed a basic weather balloon tracker and launched it with help from Emily and the volunteers. It floated into the clouds, and the whole class watched the dot blink across the tablet screen. "I want to do this forever," Aiden whispered. Emily grinned. "Then let's start now." Word spread. News crews showed up again. A video clip of Emily guiding students through an experiment with magnetic fields went viral. People started calling her the STEM Whisperer, and someone made a fan page with a banner that read, "Let her speak. Then listen." But for Emily, the real reward wasn't the headlines, it was the kids. Every town added new names to her growing map of young dreamers. They pinned their initials on a laminated board near the bus door, a constellation of hope stretching across the South. Layla, from Baltimore, finally joined them in Tennessee. She flew in with her older sister and immediately took to the lab like it was her own. Within days, she was leading the VR demos and answering questions faster than Emily could. They stayed up late that first night, sitting cross-legged on sleeping bags laid out inside the bus, whispering about dreams and pressure and how it felt to carry so much hope at such a young age. "You ever get scared?" Layla asked. Emily stared at the ceiling. "All the time. But I'm more scared of stopping." As ground control gained momentum, the challenges shifted. The logistics became more complicated. Some schools welcomed them with open arms, others were dismissive or territorial, reluctant to give class time to an outsider, even one with a personal letter of endorsement from Elon Musk. Emily learned to navigate bureaucracy, learned when to be polite and when to push. She learned to read faces, to know when someone was really listening versus just waiting to talk. She wrote nightly updates to Priya and the team back in California, attaching spreadsheets, student surveys, impact metrics. Her updates weren't just stories, they were proof that this was working. Then came the invitation from Washington, D.C. A senator had caught one of Emily's interviews and wanted her to speak at an education policy summit. Emily had never been to the Capitol. The flight was paid for. They were put up in a hotel with tall glass windows and white linen so clean it felt like a dream. When she stepped onto the stage, her hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't. She told the room about Oak Ridge. About how talent was everywhere, but opportunity wasn't. She talked about what it felt like to be a kid with ideas and nowhere to take them. And then she said something that made the whole room lean forward. I don't need every kid to go to Mars. But I need them to believe they could if they wanted to. Afterward, she met 2 members of the Department of Education, 3 nonprofit directors, and a CEO who offered to fund an expansion into the Midwest. It was overwhelming. That night, in her hotel room, Sarah curled up next to her on the couch and asked, "Do you still feel like yourself?" Emily thought about it. "Yeah," she said softly. "But sometimes I feel like I'm holding the world in a glass jar, and I can't let it fall." Sarah kissed her on the head. "Then we'll just hold it together." A few weeks later, while parked in a small Georgia town, they were setting up for a workshop when a boy named Malik approached. He was about 8, skinny, missing a front tooth, and carrying a broken RC car. He said nothing, just held it out. Emily took it, turned it over in her hands, and asked, "You want to fix this?" He nodded. "Let's fix it, then." That moment turned into an impromptu engineering lesson. They pulled parts from the kit bin, soldered connections, tested circuits. By sunset, the car was running better than ever. Malik hugged her without a word. And when he ran off, his mom came over, tears in her eyes. "He hasn't talked in 6 months, she whispered. "You gave him something I couldn't." Emily didn't know what to say. She just nodded, holding back tears of her own. After that, every time she doubted herself, she thought of Malik. Not the moment he handed her the broken car, but the moment he let go of it. The bus kept rolling. Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas. They built a travel schedule that reached farther each month. Local companies began sponsoring fuel. College students signed up to intern. Emily started live streaming some of the workshops so other schools could follow along. The name Ground Control started trending regularly on social media, often attached to videos of kids discovering they could build something meaningful. At home, Sarah was fielding calls from press outlets and researchers. There were talks about turning the idea into a formal nonprofit. People wanted to franchise it. Others wanted to license the curriculum. But Emily hesitated. "It's not about money," she said during one late-night call with Priya. "It's about trust. These kids trust us. That has to come first." Priya agreed. "Let's build the foundation strong. The scale can come later." One evening in Kansas, during a rare night off, Emily and Sarah found a quiet diner off the highway. They sat in a booth, ordered pancakes for dinner, and talked about everything but science. Sarah asked if she'd thought about what comes next: college, more labs, maybe even space one day. Emily shrugged. "I think I want to keep doing this. Not forever, but long enough. Until it's big enough that no one can ignore it." Sarah smiled. "You already did the impossible, you know. You got people to care." Emily looked out the window at the setting sun, the ground control bus parked beneath it like a tiny spaceship on Earth. "Now I just need them to keep caring." And in that quiet moment, watching her reflection in the diner glass, she realized something important. This wasn't just about one idea or one lab or one conversation with a billionaire. It was about the ripple. The kids teaching their siblings. The parents asking new questions. The teachers seeing old students in a new light. She'd sparked something, and now it had to grow. The fall air in Chicago was crisp when the ground control bus rolled into the city, its white panels dusted with the miles of travel behind them, streaked slightly from a rainstorm the day before. Emily looked out the window as skyscrapers rose like silver teeth into the sky, different from the towns they'd visited before, bigger, faster, less patient. They parked near a community center in South Side, where the director had eagerly cleared space in the lot for them and even set up flyers around the neighborhood. The moment they opened the doors, kids began pouring in, bundled in hoodies, braids swinging, curiosity burning bright behind hesitant eyes. This was a different crowd, older, bolder, used to being told things wouldn't change. Emily knew she had to earn their trust fast. She started with robotics, nothing flashy, just a simple track with a few sensors and programmable bots. She asked for volunteers, and a kid named Jalen stepped forward, skeptical but interested. He was 14, lanky, quiet, and his first question was, "Why should I care about this?" Emily didn't flinch. Because the world runs on code, and if you can learn it, you can write your own future. That line stuck. Within 20 minutes, Jalen had the bot navigating the track, and by the end of the day, he was helping others. He didn't smile much, but the fire in his eyes said enough. That night, after the center closed and the lab went dark, Emily sat in the bus, staring at the ceiling, feeling both exhausted and alive. Layla sat beside her, flipping through a new notebook. "You know what's weird?" Layla said. "They listen to you like you're older than them." Emily nodded. "Sometimes I feel older than I am. But sometimes I just feel like I'm pretending to know what I'm doing." Layla laughed softly. "You're not pretending. You're just figuring it out faster than they expected." The next day, they ran a session on climate science, using water sensors and DIY models of flood plains. One of the girls, Kiera, asked if climate change would ever hit their neighborhood. Emily hesitated, then said, "It already has. You just haven't been told what to call it." That sparked something. The questions turned sharper, deeper. Why do poor neighborhoods flood more? Why don't we get the same textbooks? Why do some schools get labs and others don't? Emily didn't have all the answers, but she had data, diagrams, and most of all, the courage to say, "You deserve better." That afternoon, while packing up, Sarah pulled her aside and handed her a message on her phone. It was an invitation to speak at a youth tech summit in San Francisco. Sponsored by Google. Keynote spot. All expenses paid. Emily blinked at the screen, then looked up slowly. That's a big deal." Sarah smiled. "You've become a big deal." The bus would keep running with Layla and the team while Emily and Sarah flew west. When they arrived in San Francisco, the contrast was immediate. Bright lights, polished buildings, endless buzz. Emily was ushered into green rooms, fitted with a lapel mic, asked to pose for promo photos with tech executives twice her age. But when she stepped on stage, none of that mattered. She told the audience about Kiera, about Jalen, about the kids who carried curiosity like armor. She didn't talk about herself, she talked about them. "We keep telling kids to dream big," she said, her voice steady, strong. "But what good is a dream if they don't have a way to reach it? Ground control isn't about saving anyone. It's about unlocking them." After the talk, dozens of people came up to her, developers, investors, educators. One man with a name badge that read, Pichai, handed her a card and said, "Let me know if you ever want to build something bigger." Emily tucked the card into her pocket without a word. She wasn't ready for Silicon Valley promises. She was still focused on real dirt, real buses, real kids. Back on the road, she rejoined the ground control team in Iowa, where a snowstorm had delayed their sessions. But even the weather couldn't stop the energy. They hosted indoor workshops, converted a school cafeteria into a pop-up lab, and taught fourth graders how to simulate earthquakes using code and foam bricks. One student, Marcus, came up to her after class with wide eyes and whispered, "I never knew science could be this cool." Emily knelt down, met his gaze, and said, "That's because no one ever showed you the right way." The program kept growing. A documentary crew began following them for a feature project. Donations increased. A national education foundation offered to fund 5 more ground control buses by the end of the year. Emily should have felt triumphant. But something inside her began to shift. It started with the pace, too many cities, too many speeches, too many hands reaching out. Then came the fatigue, sleepless nights, tension headaches, the pressure of being the face of something that felt so much bigger than just her. One morning, in the middle of a route meeting, she excused herself, walked outside into the snow, and just sat down on the frozen ground. Layla found her 10 minutes later. "What are you doing out here?" Emily stared ahead. "Trying to remember why I started this." Layla didn't say anything at first. Then she sat beside her, pulled off one glove, and handed her a folded piece of paper. "Mail came for you." This one felt important. Emily opened it. It was from Mrs. Tillman, her old teacher back in Oak Ridge. The handwriting was neat, careful. "Emily, at first, I didn't know how to feel seeing you on TV. I was proud, but also ashamed. Ashamed that I didn't believe in you the way I should have. I see now that I missed something beautiful. I'm sorry. Please don't stop. The world needs more of what you are." Emily read it twice. Her throat tightened. Then she stood, brushing snow off her coat. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's get back to it." In late November, just before Thanksgiving, they returned to Oak Ridge. The town had changed, just a little. Murals had gone up, one of which showed Emily holding a gear in one hand and a rocket in the other, with the words, "It starts here," painted above. The school invited her back for a special event. She stood in the auditorium where she'd once been laughed at and received a standing ovation before she even spoke. Brandon was there, too, sitting in the back row, not clapping, but not sneering either. Afterward, he walked up slowly, hands in his pockets. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Emily didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she replied, "Yeah. But I'm glad you're here." That night, the whole ground control team gathered in Sarah's small living room. They ate pie, played card games, and told stories from the road. It felt warm, grounding, like a pause in a long song. Emily watched them all, Layla, Ricky, the volunteers, and felt something stronger than pride. She felt purpose. Not just in what they'd done, but in what was still to come. Before bed, she pulled out her notebook, flipped past pages of sketches, diagrams, and timelines, and wrote, "We're just getting started." And as she stared at those words, she didn't feel like a kid or a celebrity or a genius. She just felt like Emily, still building, still believing, still bold enough to think she could change the world, 1 mile at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Winter had begun to settle over the Midwest when ground control rolled into Detroit, a city with a tough history but a resilient heart. Emily knew this stop would be different, bigger, louder, and charged with an energy that came from a place refusing to be forgotten. They pulled up near a rec center that doubled as a community hub for kids in neighborhoods where opportunity felt scarce. The bus doors swung open, and immediately a crowd gathered, teenagers mostly, their eyes sharp, some skeptical, others just tired of being told what they couldn't do. Emily stepped off the bus with a clipboard, greeted by Malik's mom who had moved north years ago. She smiled warmly and whispered, "Malik says hi. And he's building his own robot now." Hearing that made Emily's chest tighten. She'd never imagined how far the ripple would reach, or how much the smallest moments could grow into something fierce. Inside the rec center, Emily and her team set up stations focused on coding challenges, drone piloting, and virtual reality experiences. She paired kids in groups, encouraging them to share ideas and build together. At first, there was tension. Some groups argued over leadership, others doubted their abilities. Emily watched and waited, letting the friction run its course. Sometimes, she told them, the best ideas come from the messiest moments. Hours later, a drone flew erratically around the gym, weaving through obstacles as laughter echoed. Jalen, the quiet kid from Chicago, showed up unexpectedly, having traveled just to help. Seeing him energized the room. By the end of the week, several students had built prototype designs for devices to solve real local problems: an app to track food banks, a sensor to alert about water quality, a drone plan to monitor vacant properties for safety. Emily's heart swelled. This was more than tech, this was hope turning tangible. Late one night, Emily sat by the bus's small heater, scrolling through emails on her tablet. One subject line caught her eye: opportunity to meet Elon Musk again. Her pulse quickened. The email was from a representative at SpaceX, inviting her to a private event in Texas, a chance to share progress and pitch new ideas. The timing was tight, the bus schedule was packed, and ground control was just gaining traction in the Midwest. But this could be the breakthrough she needed to secure funding for years to come. She brought it up with Sarah and Layla the next morning over coffee. "It's huge," Sarah said, eyes bright with possibility. "But it's also a big distraction. What if it takes you away from the kids?" Layla nodded. "They need you here, but you also deserve to be heard." Emily wrestled with the choice. Traveling meant missing workshops, losing momentum. Staying meant keeping the program steady but possibly missing an opportunity to expand it beyond anything she'd dreamed. Finally, she made her decision. "I'll go," she said. But only for a few days. The Texas event was held at a sleek facility on the outskirts of Houston. The air was warm, a stark contrast to the chilly Midwest. Emily found herself in a room full of engineers, investors, and a few of the brightest minds in aerospace and technology. Elon Musk was there, larger than life and somehow approachable. When it was her turn to speak, Emily shared stories from ground control, the kids she'd met, the breakthroughs made on the road, the growing demand for access and support. She pitched a plan for a mobile STEM network, expanding the bus model into a fleet with regional hubs, curriculum development, and partnerships with tech companies. Elon listened intently, nodding along. When she finished, he asked questions about sustainability, scalability, and how to keep the program authentic. Afterward, he pulled her aside. "You're onto something rare," he said quietly. "The spark is there. You just have to fan the flames carefully." Emily smiled, grateful but aware of the weight behind his words. That night, she lay awake in a hotel room, thinking about what came next. Could she balance the vision with the reality? Could ground control stay true to its roots even as it grew? Returning to the bus, she was greeted with cheers and hugs. The team was energized, eager to hear about the meeting. Emily shared everything she could, carefully managing expectations but fueling excitement. Together, they planned next steps, applying for grants, building a tech advisory board, expanding volunteer recruitment. The road was far from over. Back in Detroit, the winter days shortened, but the workshops kept going. Emily saw the impact deepen. The kids were not only learning skills but building confidence. Some talked about college programs, scholarships, even careers they hadn't dared dream before. Emily realized that ground control was no longer just a project. It was a movement, growing roots in places many had written off. One afternoon, as she helped a group debug a piece of code, a girl named Tasha looked up and said, "You know, you're like the pilot of this whole thing." Emily laughed. "I'm just one of the crew. You all are the real pilots." That phrase stuck. It reminded her that ground control wasn't just about her leadership but the collective effort of every kid, teacher, volunteer, and supporter. She was steering, but the direction was shaped by everyone on board. As winter melted into spring, they prepared for a major milestone, a showcase event in Detroit where students would present projects to community leaders, business owners, and educators. The buzz was electric. Flyers went up, invitations were sent, and the city started to notice. The day of the event arrived, and the rec center buzzed with nervous excitement. Emily watched as groups demonstrated apps, robots, and scientific experiments with pride. Jalen presented a program he'd written to connect homeless shelters with donation networks. Malik unveiled a drone prototype designed to inspect power lines for damage. Parents and local officials applauded, some with tears in their eyes. Afterwards, Emily stepped to the podium. "This isn't just about science or technology," she said. "It's about reclaiming our future. These kids are proof that no matter where you start, you can reach for the stars." The crowd erupted in cheers. That night, as Emily drove the bus through quiet streets, she felt a swell of gratitude and determination. She knew there would be setbacks, funding challenges, political obstacles, moments of doubt. But she also knew the power of a single spark and how far it could reach when fueled by belief and community. Back in her bunk, she scribbled in her notebook, "The pilot's seat is not lonely when the whole crew is ready to fly." The journey was just beginning, and Emily was ready for every twist and turn ahead. Spring's thaw brought a new wave of challenges for ground control. The bus rolled into Cleveland, a city known for its grit and blue-collar roots, but also for communities still healing from years of economic downturn. Emily felt the weight of expectation as she stepped off the bus, the early morning sun casting long shadows on cracked sidewalks. The rec center was crowded with kids, some wary, some buzzing with curiosity. A boy named Devin caught her attention. He was 12, his arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like a defense mechanism. Emily knew that look. It was the armor kids built when they'd been let down before. She started the session with a question: "What's one thing you want to change about your world?" The room fell silent. Devin raised his hand and said, "Why bother? Nothing changes." Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shared a story about a time she felt like giving up, when the whole project seemed too big for one kid from a small town. She talked about how every small step mattered, even when it felt invisible. Devin's eyes softened. That day, the workshop focused on environmental science, mapping pollution and its effects. Emily paired Devin with other kids who were initially skeptical but grew enthusiastic as they built models predicting air quality changes in their neighborhoods. By the end of the week, Devin was asking questions, staying late to debug code, and even helping others. Emily realized the power of connection. Sometimes, the right story could unlock a locked heart. Meanwhile, news about ground control spread beyond schools and community centers. Local media featured interviews with Emily and her team, highlighting the initiative's impact. Invitations poured in for panel discussions, school board meetings, and local government forums. The more visible ground control became, the more Emily felt the pressure to represent not just herself but the hopes of every kid who'd ever been ignored. One evening, after a long day of workshops, Emily sat with Layla and Sarah in the bus kitchen, talking through a new idea: a virtual mentorship program connecting students with professionals across the country. It could give kids access to role models they'd never meet otherwise, Sarah said excitedly. Layla nodded. And it could keep them inspired when we're not there. Emily felt a spark. Let's build it. They spent weeks developing a simple platform using donated software, recruiting volunteers from tech companies, and matching mentors with kids based on interests. The pilot launched in Cleveland with mixed results. Some kids connected deeply, others struggled with the virtual format. Emily took notes, learned, and adapted the program. Through it all, she grew in her own leadership. She was no longer just the 10-year-old with a bus and a dream. She was a strategist, a motivator, and sometimes, a fierce protector of her vision. But the biggest test was yet to come. One afternoon, during a workshop in a nearby school, Emily was approached by a woman with a sharp suit and a clipboard. She introduced herself as Cynthia Reynolds, an education consultant for the state. Cynthia had questions about ground control's curriculum, its funding sources, and its long-term goals. She made it clear that some officials viewed the program as disruptive, too unconventional, even risky. Emily listened carefully but felt a flicker of frustration. We're giving kids tools they don't usually get. Why would that be a problem? Cynthia smiled thinly. Change is always a problem to some people. The encounter left Emily unsettled. That night, she confided in Sarah and Layla. We need to be ready for pushback. This isn't just about teaching kids, it's about challenging systems. They strategized ways to build alliances, partnering with local nonprofits, reaching out to supportive teachers, and gathering data to prove their impact. Emily realized that to protect ground control, she'd have to become an advocate beyond the bus, navigating political terrain she'd never imagined. Meanwhile, the kids continued to shine. At a community science fair, a group presented a project inspired by the mentorship program, a prototype for a solar-powered charging station for phones, designed to help teenagers stay connected during power outages. The judges were impressed, awarding them first prize and scholarships. Seeing the pride on their faces reminded Emily why every battle was worth it. But not all moments were victories. During a visit to a struggling school, Emily faced a harsh reality. The building was old, the computers outdated, and the staff stretched thin. One teacher confided that while she loved the program, she worried it wasn't enough. They need more than workshops, she said quietly. They need consistent support. Emily nodded, the weight settling heavier. She knew ground control was a start, but the system needed more than a mobile lab. That night, in the quiet of the bus, Emily stared at her notebook filled with plans and dreams. She wrote, "This is bigger than me. It's about changing a system that wasn't built for all of us." The words felt both daunting and empowering. The road ahead was uncertain, but Emily was determined. She wasn't just racing toward a goal, she was building a path where none existed before. Days later, the tension broke in an unexpected way. At a town hall meeting, a group of parents and educators spoke passionately in support of ground control. One mother described how her son, once disinterested in school, now talked about becoming an engineer. Another teacher shared how the program inspired her to pursue new teaching methods. Emily stood quietly, absorbing their words. It was a reminder that change wasn't always loud, it could be quiet, persistent, and deeply rooted. As spring turned toward summer, ground control continued to expand, fueled by stories like these. Emily found herself reflecting on the journey, from that first meeting with Elon Musk to the kids in Cleveland and beyond. She realized that every challenge, every doubt, every moment of fear had shaped something far stronger than a tech program. It was a movement powered by hope, courage, and the refusal to let circumstances define a child's future. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily stood outside the bus with Layla. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the air warm and soft. Layla turned to her and said, "You know, I think the thing that keeps pushing you forward isn't just the kids or the tech. It's that you believe change is possible, even when it feels impossible." Emily smiled, feeling the truth of those words settle deep inside. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's it exactly." And with that, the bus rolled on, carrying a crew ready to meet whatever came next, driven by a 10-year-old's unexpected words that had started it all. Summer had come in full force when ground control pulled into Atlanta, Georgia, a city known for its vibrant culture, history, and the spirit of resilience woven into every street corner. Emily felt the warmth not only in the air but in the welcome from the local community center. The center's director, Ms. Jenkins, greeted the team with a big hug and a promise: "These kids are ready to take the challenge. They just need the chance." The first day, Emily was introduced to Marcus, a 13-year-old with a quick smile and a sharper wit. Marcus was known in his neighborhood as someone who could get into trouble easily, but Emily saw beyond the reputation. He was curious, hungry for something different. She paired Marcus with Tiana, a girl with a quiet confidence and a love for robotics. The pair quickly formed a bond, their personalities balancing each other like yin and yang. The workshop started with their usual energy, coding, drone flying, and hands-on experiments. But soon evolved into something more profound. Marcus and Tiana, with encouragement from Emily, began to develop a project that went beyond technology. They wanted to create a mobile safety app for their community, a way for kids to alert trusted adults quickly if they felt unsafe. The idea sparked lively debates and brainstorming sessions among the participants. Emily watched as the kids took ownership, assigning roles, designing the interface, and testing the app's features. This was no longer just a program, it was a lifeline. Outside of workshops, Emily took time to explore Atlanta's neighborhoods, visiting local schools and meeting with community leaders. She listened to stories of struggle and triumph, of families doing their best against odds. One afternoon, she visited a historic library that had been turned into a tech hub for youth. Inside, a group of teenagers were learning coding from volunteers. Emily felt a connection, a sense that ground control was part of a larger movement. One that blended technology with community empowerment. But even in the midst of progress, challenges emerged. Funding remained a constant worry, and the summer heat brought logistical hurdles. One day, during a field trip to a nearby tech incubator, the team's rented bus broke down miles from the center. The delay tested everyone's patience, but Marcus surprised Emily by stepping up. "Let's make the best of it," he said, rallying the group with jokes and stories. His leadership under pressure reminded Emily how much these kids were growing, not just in skills but in character. As the summer deepened, Emily found herself reflecting on the words that had started it all, those unexpected, powerful words from a 10-year-old that had challenged even Elon Musk. She realized that those words weren't just a moment in time. They were a call to action, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. One evening, after a long day of coding and collaboration, Emily gathered the team for a campfire talk outside the community center. The flames flickered against the dark sky as kids shared their dreams and fears. Marcus spoke first, admitting he'd once thought he'd never have a future beyond the streets he grew up on. Now, he was imagining college, a career, maybe even starting his own tech company. Tiana talked about wanting to inspire other girls to get into STEM fields, breaking barriers she'd seen firsthand. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. This was the heartbeat of ground control, the transformation happening not just in classrooms but in hearts and minds. Yet, amidst the glow of progress, Emily knew the work wasn't done. At a community meeting, concerns arose about privacy and security related to the safety app. Some parents worried about data misuse, others questioned how the app would be monitored. Emily listened carefully, organizing a follow-up session to address fears and gather feedback. She realized that trust was fragile and had to be earned every step of the way. To build that trust, Emily invited cybersecurity experts to join workshops, offering transparency and education. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Parents started volunteering, eager to learn alongside their children. The community was becoming more than just a place ground control visited, it was becoming part of the team. One afternoon, Emily received a call from a local TV station interested in featuring the safety app and the stories behind it. The team prepared for interviews, practicing what they'd say and how to share their journey authentically. When the segment aired, it sparked a wave of support. Donations, new volunteers, and even offers from tech companies to provide resources. The momentum felt tangible, yet Emily stayed grounded. She reminded her team that with growth came responsibility, and that every decision should center on the kids and the community they served. As summer began to wane, Emily found herself in a quiet moment, watching the sun set behind Atlanta's skyline. She thought about Marcus and Tiana, about every child who'd stepped onto the bus with hope and left with new possibilities. She thought about the obstacles, the setbacks, the moments of doubt. And she thought about the future, a future shaped by a 10-year-old's unexpected words, a future where voices like theirs could change the world. That night, Emily penned a new entry in her journal: hope is not just a feeling, it's a responsibility. To nurture it, protect it, and let it guide us through the darkest nights. The bus hummed softly as the team prepared for their next destination, ready to carry the spark forward, knowing that every mile brought them closer to something greater than themselves. The summer heat lingered as ground control made its way to Nashville, Tennessee, a city humming with music, history, and stories of perseverance. Emily felt the pulse of the city as soon as they arrived, a blend of old and new, tradition and innovation, all wrapped in Southern charm. The community center where they set up was nestled in a neighborhood marked by both struggle and pride. On the first day, Emily met Jordan, an 11-year-old with a fierce curiosity and a quick smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jordan's home life was complicated, his single mother worked long hours, and he often looked after his younger siblings. Technology was his escape, but he hadn't yet found a way to turn that passion into something he believed in. Emily introduced the kids to a project focused on renewable energy, building small solar-powered devices and learning about sustainability. Jordan hesitated at first but quickly dove into the challenge, his hands steady and his mind sharp. He partnered with Mia, a girl who loved art and design, and together they began crafting a solar-powered lamp that could be used during power outages. As the days passed, Jordan's confidence grew. Emily noticed him volunteering to explain concepts to others and staying late to perfect their project. Outside the workshops, Emily spent time with local educators and parents, learning about the unique challenges facing Nashville's youth. She heard stories of schools struggling with funding, families balancing work and care, and kids yearning for opportunities beyond their neighborhoods. One afternoon, she visited a local music school where young people learned instruments and songwriting. The room was alive with creativity and passion, reminding Emily of the power of expression in all its forms. Inspired, Emily invited the music school's director to collaborate, dreaming up a workshop that combined technology and art, coding music apps and creating digital instruments. The idea sparked excitement and quickly took shape. Meanwhile, ground control's core team faced their own challenges. Layla, who managed volunteer coordination, was overwhelmed by requests and the pressure to deliver consistent support. Sarah struggled to keep funding applications on track while also managing daily logistics. Emily felt the weight of leadership heavier than ever but refused to let it crack her resolve. One evening, after a particularly long day, Emily gathered the team for a frank conversation. "We're doing incredible work, but we need to pace ourselves," she said. "Burnout won't help anyone. Let's figure out how to share the load better." They brainstormed ways to recruit more volunteers, streamline operations, and prioritize self-care. It was a turning point, recognizing that the mission was a marathon, not a sprint. Back with the kids, the music and tech workshop blossomed. Jordan and Mia's solar lamp became a symbol of what was possible when creativity met purpose. Other groups built apps to connect musicians, designed light shows, and experimented with digital storytelling. The atmosphere buzzed with energy and possibility. Then, unexpected news arrived. A prominent tech foundation announced a grant competition for innovative educational programs focused on underserved communities. The prize could fund ground control's expansion for years. Emily saw this as a chance to secure the future they'd been building. She rallied the team to prepare the application, gathering data, testimonials, and a compelling narrative. The process was grueling, late nights, endless revisions, and a roller coaster of hope and doubt. Finally, the day came for the announcement. Emily and the team gathered in the bus's small meeting area, hearts pounding. When the call came, Emily's voice trembled as she heard the words, "Ground Control had won the grant." The victory was both exhilarating and sobering. With new resources came new responsibilities and expectations. Emily knew that this funding could change everything, but only if they stayed true to their mission. In the weeks that followed, ground control expanded its reach. They hired additional staff, purchased new equipment, and launched pilot programs in nearby cities. Emily found herself balancing between being a visionary and a manager, learning to delegate and trust others. The kids continued to inspire her. Jordan, now a confident leader in the workshops, spoke at a local event about how ground control had changed his outlook on life. Mia organized a showcase where their music tech creations were celebrated by the community. Emily watched these moments and felt a swell of pride, knowing that the spark she'd ignited was now a flame carried by so many. But growth also brought scrutiny. Some critics questioned the program's sustainability, others worried about its focus. Emily faced tough questions at public forums and had to defend not just the numbers but the heart of ground control. She remembered Cynthia Reynolds' words about disruption and prepared herself for ongoing battles. Yet through every challenge, Emily clung to one truth: the kids mattered most. She made time for one-on-one conversations, listening deeply and learning from their experiences. One evening, Jordan pulled her aside. "Thanks for believing in me," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd be the kind of kid who could do this stuff." Emily smiled, feeling the full circle of her journey. "You always could. You just needed to see it." As summer edged into fall, Emily felt a profound shift within herself. The journey that began with a simple question and a bold statement from a 10-year-old had transformed into something beyond her imagination. She was no longer just the pilot of ground control, she was a part of a crew, a community, a movement. And with every city, every workshop, every child reached, she was reminded that change was possible, even when the odds seemed stacked against them. One night, looking out at the stars from the bus's rooftop, Emily whispered, "We're just getting started." The road ahead was still long and winding, but she was ready to meet it head-on, driven by a promise made long ago and the unexpected words that had changed everything. The crisp air of early fall greeted ground control as they rolled into Detroit, Michigan, a city with a storied past and a future still being written. Emily felt a deep connection to Detroit's spirit of reinvention, the grit that refused to quit despite decades of hardship. The community center where they set up was housed in an old building with peeling paint and high ceilings that whispered stories of the past. On the first day, Emily met Malik, a 14-year-old with a natural talent for mechanics and a shy smile. Malik had grown up watching factories close and jobs vanish, leaving his family struggling to make ends meet. Technology fascinated him, but he lacked the confidence to believe he could make a difference. Emily paired Malik with Zoe, an energetic girl with a knack for storytelling and a dream to become a journalist. Together, they began working on a project that combined Malik's love of machines and Zoe's storytelling skills, a documentary about Detroit's industrial history and the possibilities of new technology. The kids interviewed local workers, captured footage of abandoned factories, and brainstormed ways to link past struggles with future innovation. Emily watched as Malik's confidence grew with every interview and every step of production. Outside of the workshop, Emily spent time walking through Detroit's neighborhoods, absorbing the blend of decay and hope. She met community leaders dedicated to revitalizing the city, artists using murals to tell stories, and parents desperate for opportunities for their children. The challenges were immense, but so was the determination she witnessed. One afternoon, Emily visited a former automotive plant-turned-innovation hub where young entrepreneurs worked on everything from electric vehicles to urban farming. The energy was contagious, and Emily knew ground control could be part of that ecosystem, connecting kids to local resources and role models. The workshops took on a new urgency. Emily encouraged the kids to think about how technology could heal their city, building apps to map pollution, creating robots to assist in urban farming, or designing platforms to connect youth with job opportunities. Malik and Zoe's documentary project became a centerpiece, culminating in a community screening that drew parents, teachers, and local officials. The event was emotional. People saw their stories reflected in the kids' work, and many expressed pride and hope for the future. Yet, beneath the surface, challenges persisted. Funding constraints forced Emily to make tough choices about program priorities. Some workshops had to be scaled back, and staff burnout was a growing concern. Emily found herself navigating a delicate balance, pushing forward while protecting her team's well-being. One evening, after a long day, Malik approached Emily. "Sometimes it feels like we're fighting against a tide," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "I know. But every ripple counts. What we're building here matters." That conversation stayed with Emily, reminding her why persistence was key. The team also faced resistance from some local officials skeptical of ground control's unconventional approach. Meetings were tense, with questions about sustainability and impact. Emily learned to speak not only from passion but from data and stories, gradually winning allies who saw the program's potential. As fall deepened, the team launched a pilot partnership with a local tech startup, allowing kids to intern and gain hands-on experience. Malik thrived, eager to apply what he'd learned and prove himself. The internship opened doors and new possibilities, showing that ground control's reach extended beyond the bus. Meanwhile, Zoe's documentary gained traction online, shared by community groups and sparking conversations about Detroit's future. The impact was tangible, a ripple effect of awareness and empowerment. One chilly evening, as Emily sat with her journal on the bus's rooftop, she reflected on the journey. The road from a 10-year-old's bold words to this moment had been winding and full of surprises. She realized that ground control was more than a program, it was a movement shaped by resilience, creativity, and the refusal to accept limits. Looking up at the stars, Emily whispered, "This city, these kids, they're the heart of what we're fighting for." And with that, the bus rolled on, ready to bring light to the next community waiting to be heard. Winter had settled in by the time ground control arrived in Chicago, Illinois. The city's towering skyline was dusted with snow, and the chill in the air was sharp enough to wake every sense. Emily knew Chicago was a place where stories of struggle and triumph ran deep, where resilience was forged through harsh winters and hard times. The community center was bustling with kids eager to dive into the new projects planned. On her first day, Emily met Jasmine, a 12-year-old with a fierce determination and an artist's soul. Jasmine had faced more than her share of challenges, her father was incarcerated, and she often felt the weight of responsibility for her younger siblings. Technology was a way to escape and express herself, but she had never considered it a path she could pursue seriously. Emily paired Jasmine with Andre, a boy who loved math and robotics but struggled with social anxiety. Their project was ambitious, building an autonomous robot capable of navigating obstacles to deliver supplies in emergency situations. The idea resonated deeply in a city prone to severe weather and urban challenges. As the workshops progressed, Jasmine's creativity brought the robot to life, while Andre's precise calculations kept the mechanics running smoothly. Emily observed the subtle transformation in both. Jasmine grew more confident in her voice, Andre more comfortable collaborating. Outside of the workshops, Emily explored Chicago's neighborhoods, meeting with educators and community activists. She heard firsthand about the struggles many families faced, poverty, violence, and a system that often seemed stacked against them. Yet beneath the hardship, she also witnessed strength, hope, and a desire to create change. Inspired, Emily organized a community forum where kids and adults could share their stories and ideas. The event was powerful, with passionate conversations about how technology could support safety, education, and opportunity. Back in the workshop, ground control's core team faced the challenge of keeping momentum during the cold months. The harsh weather made transportation and attendance difficult, and morale dipped at times. Emily made sure to check in frequently, offering encouragement and reminding everyone of the bigger picture. One afternoon, Jasmine confided in Emily. "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere," she said. "But here, I'm not just a kid with problems. I'm someone who can make something real." Emily's heart ached and swelled at the same time. This was why she kept going. As the team worked tirelessly, a breakthrough came. The autonomous robot prototype successfully navigated a simulated emergency obstacle course, impressing local officials and community leaders. The achievement was a testament to the kids' hard work and resilience. Encouraged by the success, Emily sought partnerships with local emergency services, aiming to explore practical applications for the technology. Meanwhile, the community forum sparked new collaborations and volunteer interest. However, not all feedback was positive. Some community members expressed skepticism about technology's role, fearing it might replace human jobs or widen existing gaps. Emily listened attentively, organizing additional sessions to address concerns and emphasize inclusivity. She understood that trust was earned through transparency and engagement. One evening, Emily sat with Jasmine and Andre, discussing their dreams beyond the program. Jasmine talked about wanting to study engineering and art, to create technology that spoke to people's hearts. Andre shared his hope of becoming a software developer, helping design tools that made life easier for others. Their words filled Emily with renewed purpose. As winter turned toward spring, Ground Control's Chicago chapter culminated in a showcase event featuring the autonomous robot and other projects. Families, educators, and local media attended, celebrating the achievements and the stories behind them. Emily watched as Jasmine and Andre confidently demonstrated their robot, their faces glowing with pride. The event was more than a presentation, it was a community coming together around hope and possibility. Reflecting on the journey, Emily realized how far the program had come since its humble beginnings sparked by a 10-year-old's unexpected words. Each city, each child, each story was a thread woven into a tapestry of change. She knew the road ahead would have challenges, but also that every step forward was worth it. On the final night in Chicago, Emily wrote in her journal, "The smallest voices can echo the loudest. Our work is never done, but together, we build the future, one story, one spark, one child at a time." As the bus prepared to depart, the city's lights twinkling behind them, Emily felt ready for whatever came next, carrying with her the resilience and hope of every place Ground Control had touched. Spring was blossoming as Ground Control pulled into Denver, Colorado, a city perched against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains and buzzing with a fresh sense of opportunity. Emily felt a rush of excitement mixed with a quiet determination. Denver was known for its outdoor spirit and innovation hubs, but like any city, it had pockets where kids felt left behind. The community center where they'd landed was lively, with sunlight streaming through large windows and murals depicting mountains and local wildlife. On her first day, Emily met Sophia, a 13-year-old girl with a fierce passion for environmental science and a shy smile that hid her fierce intellect. Sophia's family had recently moved to Denver after struggles in their old neighborhood, hoping for a fresh start. But the weight of change and uncertainty often held her back. Emily paired Sophia with Caleb, a boy who loved coding but felt frustrated by the lack of resources in his school. Their project was a smart garden system, an automated setup that could monitor soil moisture, sunlight, and temperature to help grow plants sustainably indoors. The idea spoke to both of their interests and the city's environmental vibe. The kids threw themselves into the project with enthusiasm. Sophia's knowledge of plants and ecosystems complemented Caleb's programming skills perfectly. They experimented with sensors, learned about data analysis, and redesigned their prototype multiple times. Emily watched as Sophia's confidence bloomed alongside the plants, and Caleb's frustration turned into excitement. Outside the workshops, Emily took time to explore Denver's neighborhoods, meeting families who shared their hopes and concerns. Many spoke about the challenges of adapting to a new city, finding community, and accessing quality education. Emily realized that Ground Control's role wasn't just about technology, it was about building connections and resilience. Inspired by the city's love for nature, Emily organized a weekend workshop at a local park, inviting kids and families to learn about technology and sustainability in an outdoor setting. The event was a hit, with laughter and curiosity filling the air as children built mini solar-powered devices and planted seeds. Meanwhile, the core team worked behind the scenes to strengthen partnerships with local schools and nonprofits. Funding remained a constant concern, but a new donor had shown interest in supporting environmental education, opening doors for future expansion. One afternoon, Sophia confided in Emily, "I'm scared that if I don't keep up, I'll lose this chance." Emily smiled gently, "Growth isn't about being perfect, Sophia. It's about trying, learning, and believing in yourself." The message seemed to resonate deeply. As the project neared completion, Sophia and Caleb presented their smart garden system at a community science fair. Their demonstration drew a crowd, parents fascinated by the tech, kids inspired by their teamwork, and local media intrigued by the innovation. The moment was electric. Emily felt a surge of pride watching Sophia explain the system's benefits with calm assurance and Caleb answer questions confidently. The success was a reminder of what ground control was capable of, not just teaching skills but nurturing dreams. Yet challenges surfaced as well. Some community members worried about the accessibility of technology and whether programs like ground control could truly reach the kids who needed it most. Emily took these concerns seriously, organizing listening sessions and inviting feedback to ensure inclusivity remained a core focus. She knew that true impact required partnership and trust. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Emily sat with Sophia and Caleb by a small garden they'd planted together. Sophia's voice was soft but determined. "This place, these people, they're helping me believe in a future I didn't think was possible." Emily felt a lump in her throat, overwhelmed by the quiet power of that moment. As spring gave way to early summer, Ground Control's Denver chapter wrapped up with a celebration highlighting the kids' achievements and the community's support. Emily reflected on the journey, the growth, the setbacks, and the resilience. The bus was ready to move on, carrying stories of hope and change to the next city waiting in the wings. Emily wrote in her journal, "Every seed we plant carries the potential for a forest. With patience, care, and belief, we nurture what will grow beyond us." The road stretched ahead, filled with promise and challenges, but Emily knew one thing for sure. The spark ignited by a 10-year-old's words was now a wildfire of possibility, lighting the way forward. The bus rolled into Austin, Texas, under a sky painted with the fiery hues of sunset. Austin was a city known for its vibrant music scene, tech startups, and an undeniable energy that pulsed through its streets. Emily felt the buzz immediately, the sense that this place was alive with creativity and possibility, but also marked by deep divides between the booming tech world and neighborhood struggling to keep pace. The community center they set up in was nestled in East Austin, an area rich with culture but facing gentrification pressures and economic hardship. On the first morning, Emily met Carlos, a 13-year-old boy with a quick wit and a deep love for hip-hop. Carlos had a knack for beats and rhythms but lacked access to the equipment and mentorship he needed to develop his passion. Emily paired Carlos with Leah, a girl who excelled in coding but had never explored the world of music production. Together, they started an ambitious project, creating an app that would allow users to compose music by combining beats, lyrics, and digital instruments, designed especially for young artists without access to expensive studios. Carlos brought raw creative energy and lyrical ideas, while Leah translated those visions into lines of code and user-friendly design. The partnership was electric, sparking new confidence in both. Outside the workshop, Emily immersed herself in the local scene. She visited music venues, talked with artists, and connected with community leaders fighting to preserve East Austin's identity. She heard stories of displacement, cultural loss, but also fierce pride and solidarity. Emily knew Ground Control's mission needed to honor these complexities, blending innovation with respect for heritage. She organized a community event blending technology demonstrations with live performances by local youth, showcasing the power of music and tech as tools for empowerment and storytelling. The event was a vibrant celebration, filled with beats, voices, and hope. But as always, challenges emerged. Funding limitations forced Emily to make tough calls about scaling programs. Some community members worried about technology overshadowing traditional arts and feared their voices might be lost in the rush toward innovation. Emily responded with listening sessions, ensuring the program was shaped by those it served. She emphasized that technology was a tool, not a replacement for culture or identity. Carlos and Leah's app evolved through trial and error, fueled by feedback from peers and mentors. The process taught them resilience, collaboration, and the power of failure as a stepping stone. Their final demo was a hit, attracting interest from local organizations eager to use the app as an educational tool and creative outlet. Meanwhile, the Ground Control team navigated their own hurdles, balancing rapid growth with sustainability, managing volunteer burnout, and refining their outreach strategies. Emily leaned on her core team more than ever, fostering a culture of openness and support. One late night, Carlos pulled Emily aside. "This program saved me," he said simply. "It gave me a chance to be heard." Emily's eyes welled with tears. It was moments like these that made the struggle worthwhile. As summer approached, the Austin chapter culminated in a showcase where kids presented projects blending tech, art, and community stories. The event was packed, vibrant, and emotional. Emily stood backstage, watching the young creators shine, knowing each one carried the spirit of that 10-year-old who'd spoken up and changed everything. Later, she wrote in her journal, "Innovation without heart is empty." Here, creativity and culture dance together, lighting the way for a future where every voice counts. As the bus prepared to leave Austin's glowing skyline behind, Emily felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. The journey was far from over. The spark had grown into a movement fueled by courage, creativity, and connection. And with every mile, every city, every child, ground control was proving that sometimes, the smallest voices can change the world. The bus rolled into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a city layered with history and a patchwork of neighborhoods where stories of struggle and resilience lived side by side. Emily felt a familiar mix of excitement and responsibility. Philadelphia was a city that had given birth to ideas that changed a nation, yet many of its children faced battles that seemed just as historic and hard-fought. The community center where ground control would set up was in North Philadelphia, an area grappling with poverty, crime, and systemic neglect. Emily knew that the work here would be challenging but necessary. On the first morning, Emily met Jamal, a 14-year-old with a sharp mind and a quiet intensity. Jamal loved writing code but felt trapped by circumstances. His single mother worked 2 jobs, and he often had to care for his younger siblings. Emily paired Jamal with Maya, a girl passionate about social justice and storytelling, eager to use technology as a platform for change. Their project was ambitious, creating an app to connect youth with local resources, education, mental health support, job training, aimed at breaking down barriers that often kept kids like them isolated. The project quickly became more than just code and design. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope forged from personal experience. Jamal and Maya poured their hearts into it, fueled by the stories they heard and the challenges they faced. Outside the workshops, Emily spent time walking the streets, meeting community leaders, activists, and families. She listened to stories of resilience, people organizing block cleanups, creating art to fight back against violence, opening community gardens in vacant lots. Emily realized ground control had to be a partner in that fight, amplifying voices rather than overshadowing them. To that end, Emily helped organize a community hackathon, inviting local youth, educators, and technologists to brainstorm solutions to problems facing their neighborhoods. The event was a raw, energized gathering of ideas and passion, showing the power of collaboration across generations. Despite progress, hurdles loomed. Funding was tight, and some adults expressed skepticism about the kids' ability to drive meaningful change. Emily faced criticism from those who thought technology programs were a luxury rather than a necessity. She responded by sharing data, success stories, and the powerful voices of the youth themselves. One afternoon, Jamal confided in Emily, "Sometimes I wonder if what we do even matters." Emily looked him in the eyes. "It does. Every line of code, every story told, it's a step toward changing the world you live in." Their app prototype grew stronger, incorporating feedback from the community. Maya's storytelling skills brought life to the user interface, creating a platform that felt approachable and empowering. The project caught the attention of a local nonprofit that offered to partner on its launch, providing sustainability and outreach. The sense of accomplishment was palpable. As Ground Control's Philadelphia chapter neared its end, a showcase event was held in the community center's gymnasium. Families, educators, and local officials gathered to celebrate the kids' achievements. Jamal and Maya's app demo drew a crowd, sparking conversations about how technology could serve as a bridge rather than a barrier. Emily watched as the kids fielded questions with poise and passion, their voices carrying hope for a future shaped by their own hands. Reflecting on the journey, Emily felt the familiar mix of pride and humility. The challenges were far from over, but the seeds of change were planted. She wrote in her journal that night, "In places where history is heavy, the future is still ours to write. These kids remind me every day that change starts with belief." As the bus prepared to depart Philadelphia's cold streets, Emily looked back one last time. The city's grit and grace had left its mark on her. The journey continued, toward new cities, new stories, and new sparks waiting to ignite. The bus pulled into Seattle, Washington, where rain whispered over glass towers and evergreen trees lined the streets. Seattle was a city of contrasts. Cutting-edge tech giants dominated the skyline, yet many neighborhoods struggled with homelessness and economic disparity. Emily knew this chapter would challenge ground control to bridge those gaps in new ways. The community center was located in the Rainier Valley neighborhood, a diverse area rich in culture but facing serious social issues. On her first day, Emily met Amina, a 14-year-old Somali-American girl with a bright mind and a shy demeanor. Amina loved mathematics but was hesitant to speak up in class, feeling invisible in a system that sometimes seemed to overlook her. Emily paired her with Malik, a boy who loved graphic design and storytelling but had trouble focusing his energy. Their project was a multimedia app that combined math puzzles with stories from their community, designed to engage kids who felt left out of traditional education. Amina's logical thinking and Malik's creativity complemented each other perfectly. As they developed the app, Emily watched their confidence grow, not just in their skills but in their belief that their voices mattered. Outside the workshops, Emily connected with local nonprofits working on housing and youth empowerment. She saw firsthand how homelessness and instability impacted children's ability to learn and thrive. These realities made the work more urgent. Emily organized a community storytelling night, where kids and adults shared experiences of struggle and hope, using art and technology as tools for healing and connection. The event was a powerful reminder that technology was only part of the solution, the heart was just as important. As the weeks passed, the team faced setbacks. Technical glitches, funding delays, and moments of doubt. But every challenge was met with resilience. Amina surprised everyone by volunteering to lead a presentation, breaking through her shyness to share their project with passion. Malik found focus through the structure of the app's design, channeling his energy into making the experience engaging and beautiful. Emily marveled at their growth, knowing that these were the moments when change took root. One afternoon, a local tech company offered mentorship and resources to help improve the app, validating the project's potential. The partnership brought new opportunities but also raised questions about maintaining the project's community-driven spirit. Emily navigated these concerns by ensuring the youth remained at the center of decision-making, fostering a sense of ownership and pride. As Ground Control's Seattle chapter drew to a close, a showcase event filled the community center with families, educators, and supporters. Amina and Malik's app demonstration captivated the audience, blending education, culture, and storytelling in a unique way. The applause was thunderous, a testament to what could be achieved when young voices were empowered. Emily reflected on the journey, the challenges faced and the victories won. She wrote in her journal, "In a city of rain and evergreen, hope grows quietly but surely. These kids are proof that when we listen, when we believe, the future is brighter than we imagine." As the bus prepared to leave Seattle's glistening skyline behind, Emily felt a deep gratitude for the journey so far and a fierce determination for the chapters yet to come. The spark ignited by that 10-year-old's words was now a blazing flame, lighting the path forward, one city, one child, one story at a time. The journey had taken Emily across the country, from bustling cities to quiet neighborhoods, each place with its own story, its own challenges and hopes. Now, standing on the stage at Ground Control's National Summit in Washington, D.C., she felt the weight and wonder of all that had come before. The room was filled with faces, young creators, mentors, families, community leaders, all brought together by a single idea sparked by a 10-year-old's unexpected words. As Emily began to speak, she looked out over the crowd and saw reflections of every city, every child she had met. She told the story of the little girl who had asked Elon Musk a question that changed everything, a question about hope and possibility. The story wasn't just about technology or innovation, it was about belief, about listening to voices too often ignored. Over the months, ground control had grown beyond a program, it had become a movement. Kids who had once doubted themselves were now mentors. Communities that felt invisible were now partners. The challenges had been immense: funding struggles, skepticism, moments of exhaustion. But through it all, the spirit of hope and resilience endured. Emily shared stories from Chicago, Denver, Austin, Philadelphia, Seattle, each chapter a testament to courage and transformation. She spoke of Jasmine's confidence blossoming, Sophia's passion for sustainability, Carlos and Leah's fusion of music and tech, Jamal and Maya's app connecting youth to resources, and Amina and Malik's blend of math and storytelling. Each story carried a lesson, that when you believe in a child, when you give them tools and listen to their voices, you unlock potential that can change the world. As Emily concluded, she challenged everyone in the room, to support these kids, to invest in their dreams, to recognize that the future belonged to them. Then, the moment came, the surprise that no one expected. Emily introduced the original 10-year-old, now a confident and poised young woman named Lily, who stepped forward to share her vision for the future. Lily spoke not just of technology, but of empathy, of connection, of the need to build a world where no child felt unseen or unheard. Her words were electric, sparking cheers and tears. The summit ended with a powerful call to action, a commitment to continue growing ground control and expanding its reach. Emily felt a profound sense of completion, and yet, a beginning. As the crowd dispersed, she sat quietly, reflecting on the journey. She wrote in her journal, "What started as a question has become a movement. Life is full of surprises, but love and belief will always lead the way. This is just the beginning." The road ahead was uncertain, but Emily knew one thing with certainty. The spark ignited by a 10-year-old's courage had lit a fire that would burn bright for generations to come. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?